What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Designer Head. For those of you who are new here, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. I have to do the spiel of YouTube thing. This episode is going to be very special, and the reason why I'm saying it's going to be very special because it's kind of special to me. The reason why it's special to me is because I wouldn't say I became a specialist at it, but I became really good at what I'm about to talk about, not because I wanted to, but because it just happened that way. So without dragging it too far or too long, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming to watch this video, and for the new subscribers of my YouTube channel, thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot when I see people who are subscribing. It means to me that they're interested to hear what I have to say. On that note, let me say what I have to say and let's hit it. Okay, so let's begin. What are we talking about today? Today we're talking about, as I like to call it, building a research and design powerhouse on a budget. What that means really is, how do you actually conduct all the research you need to do, all the studies you need to do, talk to your customers or users, find new customers or users, and so forth, and all of this on a budget. And when I say a budget, I would say anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 a year. Not a month, but a year. Let's dive into it. So many companies, right, and as UX designers and researchers and product designers and whatnot, we've been hearing a lot in recent years and previous years and whatnot that doing research is expensive, conducting studies is expensive, and so forth. And yes, it is. Believe it or not, big companies have enormous budgets for these things. And I'm talking about millions upon millions of dollars to do research. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my natural habitat is startups. I love startups. I consult startups. I work at startups. I served as a startup bootcamp as a mentor for several years, some years ago. I'm working in a startup right now. I'm consulting a startup right now. I'm mentoring young entrepreneurs periodically. So one of the things that I kind of learned to do, right? Because when you're working at a startup, one of the things that you're constantly being under is underfunded. True, startups typically, well, not typically, but in some cases raise funding. And when there is funding, that means you have money. But that money has to go a long way and needs to be spent on engineering, operations, employees, benefits, overheads, office costs, and furniture, and you name it. So one of the least things that typically startup owners think about or entrepreneurs think about is budgets, not for the software that designers need to be using, but actually for designers to do their job in terms of research, right? And that means paying people that you're sourcing for testing your product, paying people that you're sourcing to do interviews with to understand how they might use your product, or building out a persona. And all these type of operations require budgets outside of the immediate spend of the design team, which is, people's salaries and software and cloud and computers and other hardware and then so forth. So I'll bring an example from my last company. Not the one that I'm working at right now, which is I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm taking the exact same approach. And even after a year of running a full-blown operation of research and testing, really without stopping or limiting my team in any kind of way, we still came throughout the year really under the budget that we set out to spend in the year. And I'll be very open, that budget was $30K. We came really under that $30K in the year. I think it was 22 or 23. Now, I'm immensely proud of it. Obviously, not because I'm allowing my team to have basically no limitations in research, but Also the fact that spending companies' resources is not something to be proud of, right? It's not something that, oh my God, I did research and I did this and I did that and all of that went $500,000. Well, kudos to you if you have that $500,000 to spend. I like to work at startups, and when I do that, I like to be very cautious about their budgets, because at the end of the day, there's a lot more things that they need to be considering and need to be spending their money on in order to keep going, keep growing, go for the next round, and so forth. So to kind of dive into this, what I noticed, right, in many different organizations, typically how they do research is they reach out and they work with, I guess, the most simplest and easiest approaches is to work with maybe one company or two companies or one or two products that provides you the best of everything in one-stop shop, right? For instance, one of those is usertesting.com. User testing is a great place. It is. They allow you to do a lot of things in the one single place. Half of it or a quarter of it is automated. You don't really need to do a lot of things. But at the end of the day, they charge you a lot. I believe they still charge you about $10,000 just to be on their platform. That's just being there. In addition, with all the services they provide and everything else, it can be incredibly costly to do research. So how do you build that powerhouse that you need for your product and your team without breaking a bank? Set aside a budget. And I would say a good budget would be anywhere between $25,000 to $30,000 a year. That's not crazy. Really, that's not even a salary for junior designer. That's like half or quarter of their salary. So set aside, as a startup, as a design team or whatnot, set aside $30,000. That will be your limit. Set yourself this kind of a cap of this is how much I can spend. I cannot go beyond that. How do you really do that? Is really simply, you have to get creative in a lot of ways of how to save that money. So I'm going to do a few tips. I'm going to start with how to recruit people for your testing and your research. There is one tool that I really love, and I was an early adopter when they just launched as a company, and that is userinterviews.com. User Interviews is a great platform for you to source people. They have two types of people you can source. You can source consumer and you can source professional. The difference between those two is a consumer site is, I believe right now, anywhere between $25, $30 per session, plus whatever incentive you want to provide to that person. So let's say the incentive you want to give a person for, I don't know, 30 minutes of an interview, maybe let's say $20 or $30, right? Half an hour for some people, $30, it's a lot of money because minimum wage right now is, well, I'm being hopeful. I think it's 15 nationwide. I know there's a lot of enacted legislations in for it to be a minimum wage, but some states still did not adopt that. So let's go with the 15. Right, $15 an hour, minimum wage. You pay somebody $30 for half an hour. That's good. That's really respectful to the person's time, and you're still running on a budget, right? And with that, on the professional side with user interviews, I believe the last time I checked, it was $70-some or $80 for a session plus whatever incentive. So if you're wanting to talk to somebody professional, which means, I don't know, let's say you're looking for a very specific financial consultants or real estate agents or I don't know, doctors or nurses or something very specific that you're trying to research with, right? You have a very specific demographic you're targeting, then you might be looking into the professional side. But there you have $80 per session unless you buy their yearly subscription, which lowers the cost of that a little bit. But let's talk about, pay-per-click, if you will. So you are looking for, let's say, 10 people that you need to interview for your research. That's $80 per person. That's $800 right there just for the sessions, plus the incentives. If those people are the professional ones, typically the recommended price would be anywhere between $45 to $60 for half an hour to talk to them. So you're already looking at what, $110, $120, $150 per person times 10. You're looking at $1,500. Bomb, right there. How do you save that? Well, really simply. Some people resort to Craigslist or Facebooks and whatnot. I do not find that very fruitful, to be honest, in probably most of my career. And I used to recruit people for different studies and research from different platforms before all the user testing, before user interviews, before all these platforms. And typically went through local newspaper ads, Craigslist, and some other platforms. So how do you find those professionals that you're looking for and you still keep it at a consumer level budget? You have to be creative. And that creative comes in screening. So what happens is the way user interviews work, and I believe most platforms work the same way. I haven't tried most of them in years. You essentially come up with a criteria and say, this is what I'm looking for. This is the age group. This is demographic. Income levels, household, where they might be working and whatnot. And you just throw it out there. And within 24, 48, 72 hours, you start getting back kind of people who are interested in your study, right? And if you're making it kind of broad enough, then probably within 2-3 days, you will have a pool of, 300-400 people that you can go through that are interested to participate in your study. This is where the screening questionnaire comes in, right? Because when you're screening people on that questionnaire, you can be very creative how to construct it in such a way that without necessarily asking them about their profession or stuff like that, you can be a little bit more vague and then kind of play around with questions such as, tell me about your job, or things like that, right? In your screening questionnaire, that's where they tell you about who they are and they tell you about what they do. They tell you about how much they might be making, where they work, how they work, and all these type of things. In the screening questionnaire results, when you go through people, the first thing that I would do, essentially, or my team would do, is go through those results of those questionnaires to see, okay, can we find there the people that are what we're looking for? If we're looking for lawyers, right? Very specific profession to interview. Then from 300 people that applied for our studies, in those screening questionnaires, if we see somebody mentioned, oh, I work at a law firm. Gotcha. One is there. Another one says, I'm a lawyer and I practice myself. Gotcha. Another one. I am a paralegal, but I've been working in different law firms for the past blah, blah, blah years. Gotcha. Another one, right? And that's how, yes, it is tedious. It requires some work on your part. So you don't leave that work to the platform. You do that kind of legwork yourself. We screen, we spend some time to sift through hundreds of people, look at their results of those questionnaires, and see who are the people who actually are the ones we're looking for. And that's how essentially, and don't tell user interviews, even though they probably will find out what I just said. That's essentially how we find the people we need on the budget of a consumer, and yet they're still the professional ones. You can probably use and do the same thing on other platforms. I'm sure you can do that. So that's the first part. Now the second part is, what do you do after that? Right. So for instance, if you're using platforms like user testing and you source people for interview, and you have created a, let's say non-task-based or even task-based study, and you need 10 people and you need them to work through a prototype, right? In user testing, it's all in one place. You kind of upload your prototype, you find the demographic on the same platform. You set up the tests, the people do the test, the platform will record everything, and then all you do is just sit back, wait for the results to come in, and sift through the results. I believe one of the competitors of user testing right now, or the best one, or probably the most close one too is Maze. Maze? Yes, Maze. They're the ones who do it on a slightly lower budget than user testing, and it's kind of similar approach. Regardless, the way I like to run research is I like everything to be recorded, like literally everything. Not only where people tap or click on screens, but also their facial expressions and their voice. The reason why I like to have recordings of their facial expressions and their voice is really two reasons. One is when people do things, they might be struggling or they might be not struggling, but their facial expression might showcase that they have either a disgust or frustration or surprise or annoyance or confusion. And all these things you might not pick up in the actual, just them tapping or clicking on the screen, but in their facial expression, how they, their eyebrows behave, how their eyes behave, their lips, nose, forehead, and so forth. All these things can be kind of picked up to see how people respond emotionally to your product or feature, not necessarily if they can accomplish a task. Because odds are, if a task is simple enough, most people will be able to accomplish a task. But the one thing you don't know is how they feel about it. You might ask them, but one of the things that, for those of you who are researchers, should know, or I hope you know, that what people say they do or like not necessarily means in reality that's exactly what they really like or really did. Numerous times you can see people struggling with some feature, and once they figured it out and accomplished the task, and then you ask them how was the feature, was it complex or not, and say, no, that was simple. They do it for two reasons. One is their brain already figured that out, so it feels and they can recollect this as being simple. And the second thing, they don't want to sound or look silly, that they couldn't figure out something that ultimately they did and it felt simple. So in order to do that, instead of having user interview user testing to handle all of this for us, we use a product called Lookback. Lookback essentially allows you to do three things at the same time. It will record what people do on your screen, it will record people's facial expression, and it will record people's voice, because you want people to verbalize everything they do. And if they get frustrated, stumble everywhere, or every so often, you want them to voice that. Now, we covered user interviews to source people you need, or recruit people you need. We covered Lookback for recording people when they do what you need them to do. Another thing important to cover is the quantitative study. So we just covered essentially the qualitative side, meaning you actually speak to people face to face in user interviews. You test with people and run usability tests or studies and so forth. But now let's move a little bit of concentration towards the quantitative side. Quantitative side is not necessarily you're always going to be talking to people, not necessarily you even want to talk to people, but sometimes you want to test something really quickly on a really low budget to get your response, right? So for instance, in my company, current, previous, and then before that, we made sure to test absolutely everything. And I'm not kidding when I say everything, and people are surprised when I tell them that we do test everything. We used to test in my last company sentences, icons. We ran a study once for probably 3 weeks on an icon to make sure that we're putting an icon that will definitely resonate with people, and then people will definitely understand what the icon means, right? Equally the same in this company, my current company, we're testing everything. We're testing sentences, we're testing words, we're testing content, we're testing visuals, we're testing screens, UIs, buttons, titles, icons, pictures, you name it, right? Not all of that needs to be tested through a qualitative test. A lot of this can be tested through a quantitative test, meaning let's throw it out there to hundreds of people and see what we get in response. Now, thus far, the best tool that I found in the last probably, I would say 6 years that I've been using that tool, or my team has been using that tool in different companies, is Usability Hub. It's not the cheapest thing on the licensing. I think they charge about $70 or so, I believe, per month for a single seat, right? So if you want to be on the platform or use their services, you need to pay for that. And in addition, you're paying the incentive, quote unquote. Now that incentive, essentially, it's they call them coins or tokens, or I don't know, whatever, points, doesn't matter. I don't really remember how they call it. But you buy those kind of their internal, let's call them coins for the sake of the conversation. You buy those internal credits. That's the one. Jeez, I'm getting old. I'm just kidding. So you have to buy credits. Now, depending on what kind of study you're gonna run, it can be 1 credit, 2 credits, 3 credits per person that answers your questions or clicks through your prototype or evaluates your design, or A/B tests, or just answers questions, and then so forth. Now, a credit is $1. That's it. So if you want to run, let's say you're working on the UI for a specific part of your mobile application, and there are 2 parts or 2 samples that you're really debating between. You might have 2 screens that you're like, okay, this one or this one, which one should I go? Or maybe you're having this debate with your stakeholders or product team or engineering or whatnot, right? You might have one screen with icons in the top left corner and another screen with the same icons in the top right corner, and you don't know which one is better. You need an A/B test for that. Very simple. In order to solve this and resolve your kind of debates with either yourself or any of your teammates or stakeholders, whatever, you just really need to run an A/B test and see which ones people actually resonate with, right? You literally can source 100 people for, or even, not 100, you don't need hundreds of people for that, really. I really don't. I would recommend doing A/B tests with maybe 15, 20, maybe 25. You really don't need more than that. So you grab 25 people, you do a really quick A/B test. For that, you're probably gonna get charged 2 credits per person, which is $2. So your test just costs you what, $50. That's it. $50, you got your response, right? And you know which direction to go and how to proceed. Now, when you're looking at all of this combination of all these tools, right, you definitely need to manage that. You definitely need to have an arsenal of tools, and that would be your user interviews in order to recruit participants for qualitative study. You definitely need your look back in order to record every single thing people do. You will need Usability Hub in order to conduct some really quick quantitative studies. Now, all of that can go into another tool that I really love, and actually wrote an article about this, that is called Dovetail App, as in dovetail, the bird. I look silly, I know that. And all of these studies, all this information that you collect there, right? You just take and put all of this in Dovetail. Dovetail will help you to transcribe all of your videos automatically. You don't need to do anything. It will allow you to tag everything, organize everything, and then eventually see the results and outcomes from all of your research and studies on both qualitatives and quantitatives. With all that, when you do user interviews, for instance, and you recruit people, right, the one thing that you do need to do is to have some sort of a tool that you can record the conversations with the person, because they don't provide that. So either Zoom or Google Meets or anything else. So really all of that, right, without really limiting yourself in what kind of research you want to do throughout the entire year, you can definitely keep all of this under the budget of $30,000 a year and still run a serious powerhouse of your research operations and design operations to make sure that whatever you're building is actually being tested, researched, and put in a product validated by your users or potential users. On that note, thank you for watching. I really hope that this video was helpful to you. If you disagree with what I just said, comments below, please still leave. I do read every single one of them, and I will reply if there is any. If you have questions, please reach out to me here. Once again, down below, you can ask questions. You can always find me on LinkedIn. You can always find me on ATP List, on Medium, and so many other platforms, Instagram, and so forth. Once again, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you know every time I post a new video. And on that note, thank you very much once again. Never stop learning.